We were always kind of, a little nervous before each step we went up the ladder, and that was a good thing about being four together. We all shared the experience. How many Beatles does it take to change a light bulb? 4. She was just 17, you know what I mean, and the way she looked was way beyond compare. How could I dance with another?
The Beatles, made up of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, are not only arguably the greatest band of all time, but also an extraordinary study in team collaboration. To understand their team process through collaboration, we will focus on the collaboration life cycle. Introduced in a 2008 study from the Institute of Design and Assessment of Technology in Vienna, Austria, this conceptual and methodological framework defines the phases teams evolve through over time and the key characteristic of each phase, which, when done well, can lead to team success. Quick spoiler alert, just because teams reach the decomposition phase doesn't mean they come to an end. They can re-begin in the initiation phase if driven to do so, but more on that later. Let's look at the rise, peak, and fall of the Beatles as a team through the collaboration life cycle.
The initiation and formation phases of the collaboration life cycle are the building block to any team, including the determination to collaborate, building the team or working group, coming to an agreement of common goals, defining roles, and setting up a work environment to meet the needs of the team. When John and Paul first met in 1957 as teenagers, they shared talent and the same situational influences that surrounded them in working class Liverpool. Their friends were headed off to work as their parents did, but John and Paul were clever, education through grammar school, and wanted more. This was their determination to collaborate. The early years consisted of finding the right members and the right name to match their common goal of being the number one band in the world. John was the leader at this point, as he led most of the conversation on band names and members, but he also knew they were better as a collective team and each had a unique strength to help them move and perform as one.
The final steps in the formation of the Beatles came with the addition of Brian Epstein as manager in 1961. Brian allowed the Beatles to remain creative and set their path, but he helped to dial in the initial look, asking them to ditch their leather jackets for suits so the traditional British culture of the time would give their music a chance. This worked brilliantly, setting the stage for the launch of a brand and Beatlemania. At the height of success and full operation phase, the Beatles' motivation changed from just being the number one band in the world to competing against themselves, other bands, making their mark, and finding other sounds to evolve with the times, their fans, and their own interests. The Beatles reinvented themselves many times over their short run, which translates to many cycles through the collaboration lifecycle. With each success or published results, the band had to recommit, redefine goals, and set a new coordinated work environment, change processes, and publish again. With each cycle, the Beatles changed the recording industry forever, from the most albums sold to date to their non-traditional recording practices or their process for preparing to record. The Beatles did it together with constant feedback and collaboration.
The fall and ultimate end of the Beatles cannot be attributed to one event or person, but rather a collection of environmental situations. The world at the end of the 1960s was different than the early years of the decade. The Vietnam War was at its height. Brian Epstein passed away. John, George, and Ringo preferred the solitude of living in the English countryside, while Paul soaked up the thriving underground artistic movement in London. While this cultural enablement by Paul led to another great collaboration life cycle for the Rubber Soul album, the band struggled to find the need to collaborate much after. Albums that followed were seen as a collection of individual contributions under one band name. The Beatles had lost their shared goal and become more isolated physically and theologically. A new collaboration life cycle could not begin, and the Beatles officially parted ways in 1970.
Based on the success and failures of the Beatles and the collaboration life cycle, several key lessons can be taken from this iconic team. In their rise and peak, the Beatles show a dedication to transparency, the benefit of a competitive rivalry, and the importance of shared goals. Each band member was accountable for their own alignment and keeping each other in check. Unfortunately, the loss of common goal and lack of determination to collaborate led to the end of the Beatles. Like their highly situational start, their end occurred in the same manner.